Hi, it's nice to meet you. My name's Eric. I'm going to be your department recorder today. It is my job to act as witness to all the documentation being signed, to organize all the documentation and get it filed into record, and to read out all these forms to you. You are more than welcome to ask me questions of clarification or to ask me to repeat any part of what I read, but I do need to let you know that I am not allowed to offer any kind of advice or suggestions on how you should interpret or fill out any of the documents. I am strictly here as a recorder, not as any kind of advisor. You are welcome to have legal counsel here to act as an advisor for you, and if at any time you don't feel comfortable signing something or authorizing something, you are more than welcome to put this on hold to get whatever kind of advisement you need in order to feel comfortable proceeding. I'm here on your timetable, not the other way around. So don't feel any kind of pressure to rush, okay? Okay, great. Then let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot to talk through. All right, so as you of course know, all of this paperwork is in relation to an application to grant informed unempowered status onto an unempowered person. So, in layman's terms, you want to tell someone without magic that magic exists, correct? Perfect. All right, well then you're in the right room. I take it you've already sat through the courses and the videos. Yeah, they can be a bit long. They could probably do with an update, to be honest, but what's done is done, and you got through them. And now you've already filled out the basic application itself online, but we have some supplementary agreements, acknowledgements, affidavits, approvals, waivers, you name it, it's probably somewhere in the pile. And by department law, these specific documents are required to be read to you and signed in person with a witness, all in service of making sure that you are just completely aware of the gravity of this status being granted. So, with all of that in mind, are we good to proceed? Cool. Okay. So these first 2 pages are actually for me to review and sign, but I like to go over them with the applicant as well, just for transparency's sake, just so you can see what I'm filling out, and what instructions I'm bound to as your recorder. So, let's see. Let me get the pile. All right, there we go. All right, so first up, we have instructions to department recorder. That's me. So up top, a lot of the sheets are going to have your case number. This is just your case number that we use to track the application. Your case number is 930-210-270-206. Application details. So the issuing authority, this is who will actually be issuing the informed unempowered status. So that is, of course, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices. The attention to Unempowered Relations Division, 6996 South Oral Avenue, Dahlia, California. Applicant, that's you. So that's your name and address, correct? Good. Okay. On this next section, we have a lot of dates and a lot of terms. So let's just go through them. So request date, that's the date when you initially filed your online request to get the informed unempowered status granted. and that was submitted on 3/28/2022. Filing date, that is the date when we'll actually go ahead and file the completed application. So that's today's date, 4/9/2022. Signing date, same thing. It's when we're signing the documentation. So that's also going to be 4/9/2022. These next couple of dates, these are projected dates. So based off of getting it signed and filed on 4/9, your projected close date is 1 month out on 5/9/2022. As long as that is reached, then we also have your issue date. Issue date is, provided that the application does get approved, that's the date that that the department will officially issue that status onto your unempowered person. And in that case, it would be the next day, 5/10/2022. And disperse date, that's the date when that status will be dispersed to that person. So that's also that same date of 5/10/2022. Rescission date, not applicable in this case. That would be if it was a scenario where you were requesting temporary status granted them for some reason. That would be your expiry date. So your expiry date would be if this was a temporary situation and that status was set to expire at some point. That would be your expiry date, which is also NA. Rescission date, rather, is if at some point in the future, for whatever reason, that status needs to be revoked, there will then be a rescission date. Hopefully that never happens, but that's what that section is for, and that would be the same date as the expiry date if it was a temporary one, but it's not. So those are both NA. Over here, we've got your application status. So your application status is currently in review until it is approved or declined. Right now, since we're still submitting it, we're in review. Your filing status, you set this during your application process. You set it to being a non-married partner to the unempowered person in question. Agent, that's me, ER11199, that's my ID. You'll see this on quite a few forms. Case number, it's the same number as up here, 9300210270206. Office, this is the office that I work out of. I work out of 679. Term length, not applicable. Again, it's not a temporary issuance. Assumption, will allow, and contingent, not eligible. We'll go into those two conditions in more detail when we get further into the paperwork, but suffice it to say that's the normal those are the things you would expect to see on a normal application, that it will allow assumption and it's not eligible for contingency, but we'll get there a bit later. Next portion, this is your vesting details. So this is how you and the unempowered individual will be addressed throughout the rest of the paperwork. So applicant vesting details should read as follows. We've got your name, non-married partner, and then the unempowered vesting details should read as follows. Their name, non-married partner. Looks good? Okay. All right, so down here we have some more jargon. All questions concerning these instructions, conditions, and agreements should be directed to the issuing authority, which is Department of Uniform Magical Practices. All documents must be in the care of issuing authority, Department of Uniform Magical Practices, 24 hours after signing of application documents. This case is projected to close by 5/9/2022, as we can see up here. Failure to comply with these instructions may delay closing. So we've got, in the event this case does not close on the date indicated in these closing instructions, or if the case documentation does not conform to the information stated herein, do not close the case without notifying issuing authority. So again, these are the instructions for me. So Department Recorder, they want my signature, my printed name, and the date. So I will go ahead and do that one. I just wanted you to see that that's what this is, so you don't wonder what I am writing, and the date 4/9/2022. Okay. Next up, we have, there we go. We have the Platen Act information form. So this is part of me as your department recorder verifying your identification. So again, we have your case number. All right, let's just go ahead. To help the department fight individuals' efforts to misrepresent themselves and their criminal histories, department law requires all agencies, partners, and affiliates to obtain, verify, and record information that identifies all process participants. That would be you in this case. When applying for an informed unempowered concession, applicants will be asked for their name, address, date of birth, and other information that will allow the department to identify them. Applicants may also be asked to show identifying documents, including those issued by unempowered agencies and governing bodies. Where are we at? The following applicant information must be obtained to be in compliance with the Department of Uniform Magical Practices Platen Act of 1978. This information must be retained for 7 years after case closure, regardless of closing status. So whether it gets approved or denied, that information is maintained for 7 years. So we've got applicant name, that's you, residential address, that should also be yours, your date of birth, and your empowered identification number, your EIN, should be right there. I am supposed to complete a separate form for each applicant. In this case, there's just the one of you. You're applying individually, so we only have to worry about one of these. And forms of identification, only one form of verification is required. So we have a couple options. You tell me which one you want to go with. We've got your empowered identification card, your state-issued driver's license, a state-issued ID card, a passport, or your social security card. Something to note before you decide which one to give me, I am supposed to inform you that any identifying information included on verification documents that is not requested by this form will not be retained and should not be recorded on any part of this form, including in comment section below. So nothing written there. So basically what that is saying is whichever form of identification you choose, no matter how much information is on there, the only things I'll be recording down are the country, state of origin, the ID number, the issuance date, and the expiration date. I won't be writing down anything else on there. That all stays confidential to you. And then, before we do that bottom part, so which one of these do you want to go with? Okay, perfect. And I will take that from you. Thank you. All right, I've gotten filled out that portion. So we went with the empowered number, issuance date. Okay, and expiration date. Good. Okay, we don't need any comments. And then this bottom section is still just for me, but I'll go ahead and read it to you. I certify that as the department recorder, I have personally viewed and accurately recorded the information from the documents identified above and have reasonably confirmed the identity of the applicant. All right, and I will go ahead and sign, print my name, and date 4/9/2022. Okay. 2 sheets down. All right. Okay, so now back at it. Now we're on the fun part, the part where you have to sign everything. Alrighty, so we're going to start here with our application initial approvals. Please complete and return. That's your case number. This should be your name and address. Are we good? Good. Date, April 9th, 2022. That's my recorder number. That's the office I work out of, 679. So this form is some approvals that you need to make before we go ahead and get into it. So basically we're going to talk through what your signatures mean, how we're going to handle any corrections, what the closing disclosure means, and we're going to touch on your power of attorney again. We talked about that briefly in the instructions, but we're going to go through it again. So, signatures. Applicant must sign all documents exactly as their name appears on the blank line provided for their signatures. Where a witness is required, the document must be witnessed. If an acknowledgement is provided, a person authorized to take acknowledgement in the state of application filing must execute the acknowledgement. The acknowledgement date must be no earlier than the date of the document being acknowledged. Right. Corrections. Any correction to application documents must be approved in writing by the issuing authority in advance. No whiteout permitted. Approved deletion should be made by marking a single line through the language being deleted. All additions and deletions must be initialed by all applicants. In this case, that would just be you. Closing disclosure. The applicant and issuing authority closing disclosures must clearly indicate the recipient of each item shown on the disclosures. Both the applicant and the issuing authority must sign the closing disclosure if signature lines appear on the document or any addendum to the document. The final closing disclosure must be received by each party no later than 3 specific business days before closing. However, if closing disclosure becomes inaccurate before closing, issuing authority shall provide corrected closing disclosure reflecting any changed terms to the parties, so parties receive corrected closing disclosure at or before closing. The closing disclosure is prepared by the issuing authority, so dump. The department recorder, me, is not allowed to make updates to the closing disclosure. If any changes occur, the application documents may need to be redrawn and re-signed. And then we have power of attorney. Power of attorney. Prior written approval must be obtained from the issuing authority when submitting a case by power of attorney. If granted, the power of attorney must be specific to the case transaction and must specifically show the complete address of all parties. It must be recorded prior to the security document in the same county in which the security instrument is recorded, and the issuing authority must receive a copy of the recorded power of attorney as a trailing document. If issuing authority is closing case by power of attorney, a certified copy of the signed power of attorney must be made available to the applicant, which would be you. Executed closing documents are to be delivered to the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, attention, the Unempowered Relations Division, 6996 South Oral Avenue, Dahlia, California. And I'll have you go ahead and sign there and date there. Cool. Okay. Next up, we have our signature name affidavit. All right, so on this one, we have your case number, 930-210-270-206, applicant address, that should be your address, correct? Good. All right, this is one more that I sign, actually. So before me, the undersigned department recorder, so me, vetted and endorsed in and for said county and state on this day personally appeared your name, who, after being by me first duly sworn upon oath, does depose and say that your name, as the name is signed on the note and or security instrument, is one and the same person as also your full name in this case, as the name appears in various application documentation. Basically just saying that anywhere where your name appears or your full name appears, it's the same person. So I'll have you go ahead and sign there and there in just a second. We're also verifying that we are currently in the state of California, in the city of Dahlia. Subscribed and sworn to or formed before me on this, I'll fill out this section, but it'll say 9th day of April 2022 by your name. I will then state when my commission expires. I will go ahead and sign it, and I will place my seal on it. So I'll have you go ahead and sign first. Perfect. My turn. It is the 9th day of April 2022. My commission expires on January 31, 2023. Department recorder. My name and my seal. There we go. All right. Next up, we have filing vesting approval. This one, just like the ones previous, we've got your name and address, date, recorder, it's me, office, that's me. The instructions in this case are modified, amended, or supplemented as follows. Applicant vesting to read as follows: your name, non-married partner. And the unempowered vesting is to read as follows: their name, non-married partner. All of the terms and conditions remain the same. That sounds good. Go ahead and sign. Don't want to work on it. Go ahead and sign and date. All right, cool. Now we have the application addendum approval. Again, as before, address, date looks right, me and my office. We're good there? Good. Okay. So this one states, I hereby acknowledge receipt of copy of all addendums and supporting documentation, if applicable, to the above referenced case, that being your case number from before. This is just saying you approve that you're going to get all of the addendums throughout all of this. I'll have you sign and date. All right, perfect. Let's see. What do we got now? We got application filing status. Okay. So this is another confirmation of how you are filing. So we got your case number as expected. So now for filing status, please choose one. Keep in mind that applicant relation to the unempowered. So you're going to be reading these as though you are the unempowered's parent or legal guardian. You are the unempowered's child or legal ward, sibling, other filial connection, in which case you would need to specify, spouse, non-married partner, or other non-filial connection, in which case you'd need to specify. In the previous documentation, you had already stated that you were filing as a non-married partner, so you should go ahead and just X that one, as long as nothing's changed, right? Good. Okay. In the instance of joint filing, complete a separate form for each applicant. Not applicable in this case because you're filing individually. And then our final little disclosure here. Filing status is subject to verification by the issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices. I certify as the applicant, that the filing status selected is the most current representation of the relation shared with the unempowered individual associated with this case. I further affirm that in the occasion of a change of a relation to one of the other optioned statuses, an amendment to the application will be filed to the issuing authority within 1 month of the change. The issuing authority reserves the right to reassess the application at that time and may result in cancellation of the application and subsequent revocation. So, just stating that if your relationship status changes from that in which you have filed, you'll need to alert the issuing authority, dump, within 1 month of that having happened. I'll have you go ahead and sign, print your name and date, and you also want to specify the status. All right, perfect. Paper's getting messy. Okay, now we're into the really complicated ones. Not complicated, I shouldn't wrote that one. The real wordy ones, how about that? So now we're going to have to go through the terms and conditions of your application. We're just going to have to read through the whole thing, so this part will take a while. But before we start, case number, looks good? Yep. Your name and address, good. Date, April 9th. Recorder, that is me, that's my office. All right, we're ready? Cool. go ahead and get started. So, number 1 of your terms and conditions of application. Number 1, employment of department recorder. That's me. Applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, agree to employ ER 11199 as the department recorder in handling the above referenced case. Department recorder will not be bound by or obligated to act upon any instruction, demand, or notice unless it is in a writing signed by the party or the party's agent delivered upon such instruction, demand, or notice. Deposit of documentation. Number 2. Applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, agree to deposit into the above referenced case all documentation requested by the department recorder for the purposes of identity verification and application submission decision. If any documentation given by or on behalf of the applicant is subsequently found to be fraudulent or in some other material way invalidated, the applicant agrees to provide additional substantiating documentation as requested to be provided within a 36-hour window beginning at the time of request issuance. If requested documentation is not received by the conclusion of those 36 hours, the application is in breach and subject to cancellation. If the issuing authority determines that no additional documentation would resolve the fraudulent or materially invalidated documentation, the application is in breach and subject to cancellation. Application recording. Applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, instruct the department recorder to issue into record all documentation used for any purposes within the application process necessary to finalize the above referenced case. When these instructions have been complied with, applicant and issuing authority further instruct the department recorder to file or deliver all process documentation. In addition, applicant and issuing authority authorize the department recorder to execute and record on their behalf an affidavit of accreditation based upon the received character statements unless instructed by the applicant and issuing authority to the contrary. Number 4, indemnity. Applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, will bear responsibility of all costs, damages, attorney's fees, including without limitation costs for services of in-hours counsel, costs, expenses, and liabilities the department recorder may incur or sustain in connection with these instructions, the case, or any court action or dispute resolution procedure arising from these instructions or the case, unless caused by the bad faith, willful misconduct, or gross negligence of the department recorder. Number 5, professional advice. Applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, acknowledge that the department recorder has not given and will not be requested or expected to give legal advice. To give advice as to the type or form of any instrument to be used in connection with this case. To review any documents deposited into record to determine their legality or sufficiency. To explain the meaning or legal consequences of any document. As a convenience for the applicant and issuing authority, the department recorder may make available certain standard forms of instruments that are commonly used, but does not and will not recommend or select a particular form, and will not complete, fill in, or alter any form unless specifically instructed to do so by the parties, their attorneys, representatives, or agents. Where was I? Their attorneys, representatives, or agents who will designate the specific information to be inserted on the form or other specific source of such information. Resignation. Number 6, department recorder may resign upon written notice to applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices. If the department recorder resigns, all documentation held by department recorder will be returned to the party that deposited them into the case, and department recorder will have no liability under these instructions. Number 7, jurisdiction, venue, choice of law. Any litigation or arbitration arising out of this case that involves the department recorder will be filed and maintained in the county in which the application was received. The prevailing party or parties in any litigation or arbitration proceeding, including department recorder, will be awarded, in addition to any other available remedy, all expenses, fees and costs, including expert witness fees, and all reasonable attorney's fees incurred by the prevailing party or parties. The award of cost, fees, expenses, and attorney's fees will be determined by the court or arbitrator and not by a jury. Department law will govern all of the terms and provisions of these instructions and the case. All right. Page 2. Notice. Applicant and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, agree that all notices delivered to any party or to department recorder in accordance with the case between applicant and issuing authority will be delivered to all parties and to department recorder to constitute effective notice. Cancellation. Number 9. Except as otherwise provided in these instructions, any party who wishes to cancel these instructions because of any material breach by another party and who is not in material breach except as occasioned by a material breach by the other party may cancel these instructions by delivering written notice of cancellation to both the breaching party and to the department recorder stating the nature of the breach. Cancellation will become effective immediately upon delivery of the written notice of cancellation to both the breaching party and the department recorder. In the event of a dispute between applicant and issuing authority regarding recorded documentation, applicant and issuing authority authorize department recorder to release the documentation pursuant to the terms and conditions of these instructions. Applicant and issuing authority specifically authorize department recorder to act in their sole and absolute discretion in the release of documentation. Applicant and issuing authority agree to hold harmless and indemnify department recorder against any claim, action, or lawsuit of any kind, and from any loss, judgment, or expense, including costs and attorney's fees arising from or relating in any way to the release of documentation. Notwithstanding any other provisions in these instructions, department recorder may, at their election and in their sole discretion in the event of any conflicting demands made upon it concerning these instructions or this case, hold any documentation deposited in case until it receives mutual instructions by all parties or until a civil action has been concluded in a court of competent jurisdiction determining the rights of the parties in the alternative. Department recorder may, at any time, at their discretion, commence a civil action to interplead any conflicting demands to a court of competent jurisdiction and will be entitled to deduct its costs and attorney's fees from funds deposited in connection to this interpleader action. In the event of cancellation and upon delivery of the written notice of cancellation to both the breaching party and to the department recorder, the issuing authority reserves the right to immediately revoke any previously issued informed unempowered statuses pursuant to the case. Number 10, revocation of informed unempowered status. In the event of cancellation and upon delivery of the written notice of cancellation to both the breaching party and to the department recorder as deemed fit by the issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, any informed unempowered status is delivered upon any unempowered individuals in accordance with this case may be summarily revoked. Notice of revocation must be served to the breaching party, department recorder, and informed unempowered whose status is being revoked. A 48-hour window begins immediately upon delivery of written notice of revocation to all parties wherein a motion for exemption to revocation may be issued by the breaching party, the department recorder, or the informed unempowered individual to be resolved through arbitration. In the event of no motion for exemption to revocation being submitted or at the conclusion of arbitration, if the motion for exemption to revocation is denied, revocation is to be issued by an authorized agent of the issuing authority through memory modification to the unempowered individual. Number 11, failure of parties to act. If the department recorder is presented with conflicting demands as to any documentation on deposit when the case is canceled by either of the parties, and the parties cannot agree as to their disposition, and no legal action to resolve the conflict has been commenced within 1 year from the date department recorder notified the parties of the conflicting demands, department recorder will return without further notice the documents to the party who deposited them after deducting all charges. Department recorder will have no further duty or liability in connection with the documents or the case. If the parties have taken no action within 6 months after the date set to close case, as optionally extended in writing, department recorder may, at their discretion, terminate the case and return all documents to the parties who deposited them or for whose benefit or credit they were deposited. Number 12, compliance with law. Applicant represents and warrants to the department recorder that applicant has complied with all applicable department laws and regulations relating to the application process and will pay all costs, damages, attorney's fees, expenses, and liabilities the department recorder may incur or sustain in connection with any breach by applicant of this representation and warranty. 13. Copies to department agencies and partners. Department recorder is authorized to furnish copies of any documents or papers to the issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, agencies, and partners. The issuing authority designates their agencies and partners as their duly authorized agents for the purpose of accepting on their behalf documents or notices intended for delivery to the parties. Number 14, certification. Application and issuing authority, the Department of Uniform Magical Practices, have read and understand these instructions and agree that all instruments bearing their signature throughout the course of the case signify their approval of the contents of these instructions and any such instruments. Applicant acknowledges that they have been advised of their right to seek independent advice before signing these instructions and any instruments and documents that have been presented or will be presented during the course of the case, that they were given the opportunity to ask questions of the department recorder about these instructions. Applicant and issuing authority understand the department recorder is relying upon this certification in closing the case and agree the department recorder will continue to act pursuant to these instructions until served with a written notice of cancellation of these instructions signed by both the applicant and issuing authority. All right. And then I will have you sign and date there, and I will sign and date here. Stuck. There we go. And I sign and 4/9/2022. All right. Whew. That one's a mouthful. All right. Now, this is the uniform application. This is the actual application itself. I know that you did already fill this out online, but unfortunately we have been having some technical issues, so I am going to have to ask that you actually fill this out again. What I will say is you should have received a confirmation email when you submitted it the first time. When you submit it online, I should say. Do you have that email? Can you bring it up on your phone? Okay, great. Because that will actually list, that'll be a copy of it, and you can actually use that to write down any information in case you couldn't remember it. And when we get to the Affidavit of Intention section later on, that way you can just actually copy that word for word, so you don't have to come up with another statement of intention. So again, very sorry that we have to go through this, but yeah, we've just been having a lot of issues lately. That said, because I have to have you fill this out again, I do actually have to read the whole thing out to you, unfortunately. Sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and read through the entire thing, all 3 pages. And then I will pass it over to you to go ahead and fill out. Like I said, you can bring it up on your phone and you can just copy your answers over if that makes it easier. And we'll go ahead and get that filed into record, and we can continue on with the rest of the process. Good? Okay, cool. Thank you for understanding. I do appreciate that. All right, so to be completed by issuing authority, your case number, they've already loaded that in, Office 679. That's me. Uniform application. All right, so let's go ahead and just truck on through this. Section 1, applicant information. 1A, personal information. I'm going to have you fill out your name, first, middle, last, suffix if you've got one. Alternate names, listing names by which you are known or under which the application was submitted. You are going to list down your empowered identification number, your EIN. You're going to put down your date of birth in MMDDYYYY format. So make sure you do a leading 0 if you've got one. Citizenship, I'll have you mark what your citizenship status is. Type of application, you're going to specify if you're applying individually or jointly. You're applying individually, so you'll just check that one. If you were jointly, you would need to list the total number of applicants and verify that, you'd have to assign your initials to verify that everyone's applying jointly. Don't worry about any of that. Just go ahead and mark applying individually, because that's how you're set up. List names of other applicants, you don't have to worry about that again, because you're filing individually. Down here, I'm going to have you fill out your marital status. Specify whether you're married, separated, unmarried. Unmarried includes single, divorced, widowed, civil union. Civil union, domestic partnership, or registered reciprocal beneficiary relationship. Dependents, if you have any, list the number of them and their ages. Contact information, going to have you fill out your home phone if you got one, cell phone number, work phone if you have one, extension if that's relevant, and list your email address. Okay, then we're going to do your current address. Pretty standard here. You're going to have to put your street address, unit number if you've got one, city, state, zip, country. How long at the current address? You don't have to know for sure. Just give us a rough estimate of years and months. If you don't have a primary housing expense, you'd go ahead and check that one. If you own the property, select own. If you are renting, select rent and state a rough amount of your rent per month. If you have been at that current address for less than 2 years, I'm going to have you do the same thing and list out your former address. If you've been there more than 2 years, you can go ahead and just check does not apply. But otherwise, you would do street, unit, city, state, zip, country. How long have you been there? Years and months, just an estimate, and the housing expense situation. Mailing address. Only worry about this if it's different from your current address. If it's the same as your current address, go ahead and check does not apply. If it is different, then I'll have you fill out street, unit, city, state, zip, and country. All right. Page 2. So here we have 1B, which is your current employment or self-employment. If you're not employed, go ahead and do does not apply. If you are, I'll have you fill out your employer or business name, the phone number of that business, the address of it, street, unit, city, state, zip, country, your position or title, start date. Again, doesn't have to be exact. Just give us a pretty, a rough estimate. How long in this line of work? Same thing, years and months. Just estimate it as close as you can. If you are the business owner or if you're self-employed, you go ahead and check that box. And if that's relevant and you do check that box, just verify whether or not you have an ownership share of less than 25% or a share of 25% or more. Section 2, unempowered information. So this is going to be the section all about the person for whom you're applying the informed unempowered status. This is all of their information. So 2A, personal information. Going to have you put their full name, first, middle, last, suffix if they've got one, alternate names if they have any. You're going to list their social security number. You're going to give their date of birth, again in the same format, verify what form of citizenship they have, their marital status, married, separated, or unmarried, with those optional conditions. If they have any dependents, you're going to go ahead and say how many there are and their ages, and then the contact information for that unempowered person, home phone if they've got one, cell phone if they've got one, work phone if they've got one with an extension, and their email. Going to have you also list their current address. Again, street, unit, city, state, zip, country. How long have they been at that current address? You can just estimate it, years and months. And their mailing address. If it's the same as the current address, go ahead and does not apply. If it is different, street, unit, city, state, zip, and country. 2B, relation information. So this is, again, like you did on that previous form. Look at it from the view of you are the unempowered's what? You are the unempowered's parent or legal guardian, child or legal ward, sibling, other filial connection, in which case you need to specify, spouse, non-married partner, or other non-filial connection, in which case you need to specify. You will presumably be marking non-married partner, since that's what we've got on the rest of the application. And then, last but certainly not least, we have section 3, which is application information, affidavit of intention. This is the part that you're probably really going to want your phone for. So affidavit of intention. State your reasoning for applying for informed unempowered status for the above referenced unempowered individual. Be thorough in your explanation and provide justification and reference documentation wherever necessary. This section can strongly influence the likelihood of application approval or denial. So, like I said, I imagine you don't want to have to reinvent the wheel on this. If you pull that up on your phone, you can go ahead and just copy over word for word what you have as your affidavit of intention on why this should be submitted. So, imagine that's going to take a while. I'm going to go ahead and hand these back over to you. Let me pull out everything we don't need yet. We will need everything eventually. Oh, sorry. There actually is one other section that we should go over before I have you fill out the rest of the application. So we have our section 4, acknowledgements and agreements. Acknowledgements and agreements. Okay. So, definitions. Issuing authority includes the issuing authority's agents, service providers, and of their successors and assigns. Other application participants includes any actual or potential joint applicants of the case resulting from this application, acquirers of any beneficial or other interest in the case, and and insurer, any guarantor. It's a lot of talking. And insurer, any guarantor, any servicer of the case, and any of these parties, service providers, successors, or assigns. By signing, you are stating, I agree to acknowledge and represent the following. 1. The complete information for this application. The information I have provided in this application is true, accurate, and complete as of the date I signed this application. If the information I submitted changes or I have new information before closing of the case, I must change and supplement this application, including providing any updated/supplemented documentation. The terms and conditions of any approval signed by me in connection with this application are true, accurate, and complete to the best of my knowledge and belief. I have not entered into any other agreement, written or oral, in connection with this application. The issuing authority and other application participants may rely on the information contained in the application before and after closing of the case. Any intentional or negligent misrepresentation or misrepresentation of information may result in the imposition of cancellation of application, revocation of any issued informed unempowered statuses, civil liability on me, including monetary damages if a person suffers any loss because the person relied on any misrepresentation that I have made on this application, and or criminal penalties on me, including but not limited to fine or imprisonment or both under the provisions of department law. Number 2, character statements and appraisals. Any character statement or appraisal obtained by the issuing authority is for use by the issuing authority and other application participants. The issuing authority and other application participants have not made any representation or warranty, express or implied, to me about the application, the applicant, or the unempowered. Number 3, electronic records and signatures. The issuing authority and other application participants may keep any paper record and or electronic record of this application, whether or not the application is approved. If this application is created as or converted into an electronic application, I consent to the use of electronic records and electronic signatures as the terms are defined in and governed by applicable department electronic transactions laws. I intend to sign and have signed this application either using my electronic signature or a written signature, and agree that if a paper version of this application is converted into electronic application, the application will be an electronic record, and the representation of my written signature on this application will be my binding electronic signature. I agree that the application, if delivered or transmitted to the issuing authority or other application participants as an electronic record with my electronic signature, will be as effective and enforceable as a paper application signed by me in writing. And then I will have you sign and date. But before we do that, I'll have you go ahead and fill out the rest of the application. Let me just make sure that was the last page. All right, good. So I'll keep these ones for now. And I'll have you go ahead and work through this. I'm going to just be over on my computer here in the meantime. As you finish each page, let me know so I can go ahead and enter it into record. Okay? Awesome. Done with that one? Okay. Go ahead and take that. Verify it's all filled out. Okay. Checking in employer business name, check personal information, marital status, contact information, address, mailing address, of my partner. Okay, perfect. All right, and just let me know when that one's done, and then I'll just have you sign that last sheet. All done? Okay, perfect. Yep, that all looks good. Okay. So then, last thing, I'm going to have you go ahead and sign and date. Awesome. Thank you so much. Again, I apologize for making you have to fill that out again. I know you did it all online, but such is the way of things sometimes, unfortunately. Okay. Now, back to the fun. More reading for me. All right, so now we are on to the note itself. So we've got your case number that we've had throughout. April 9th, current date, City of Dahlia, State of California, applicant name. There you are. And now we're going to go ahead and go through this one as well, starting with number 1. Applicant's promise to provide documentation in return for consideration to granting informed unempowered status unto my unempowered relation. And like with the last one, this is written through the viewpoint of you. So when I say I, this is you, what you'll be affirming as signing. So in return for consideration to granting informed unempowered status unto my unempowered relation, I promise to provide any and all documentation for the purposes of identity verification, relation verification, intention verification, character vetting, et al., hereafter referred to as documentation, to the order of the issuing authority. The issuing authority is Department of Uniform Magical Practices. I will respond to all requests for additional documentation within the allotted response windows outlined. I understand that the issuing authority reserves the right to transfer the holding of this application to their duly authorized agencies and partners. The issuing authority, or anyone who takes this application by transfer and who is entitled to maintain record of the documentation under this application, is called the issuing authority. Applicant's failure to provide documentation. A. Incomplete application. If the application is submitted without all required documentation attached, the application will be considered incomplete and will not be processed. A new application will need to be submitted, including the required documentation. B. Fraudulent or invalidated documentation. If any documentation given by or on my behalf is subsequently found to be fraudulent or in some other material way invalidated, I agree that it will be at the discretion of the issuing authority to determine if additional documentation would satisfy the documentation requirements or if no resolution is possible. C. No resolution. If the issuing authority determines that no additional documentation would resolve the fraudulent or materially invalidated documentation, the application is in breach and subject to cancellation. D. Additional documentation. If the issuing authority determines that additional, revised, or replaced documentation would satisfy the documentation requirements, I agree to provide additional substantiating documentation as requested by the issuing authority to be provided within a 36-hour window beginning at time of request issuance. If requested documentation is not received by the conclusion of those 36 hours, the application is in breach and subject to cancellation. Number 3, documentation. All documentation submitted into record for the case will be held by the issuing authority at Department of Uniform Magical Practices, Attention Unempowered Relations Division, 6996 South Oral Avenue, Dahlia, California, or at a different place if determined by the issuing authority. Number 4, giving of notices. Giving of notices. Unless applicable law requires a different method, any notice that must be given to me under this note will be given by delivering it or by mailing it by first-class mail to me at the address above on the previous sheet, or at a different address if I give the issuing authority a notice of my different address. Any notice that must be given to the issuing authority under this note will be given by delivering it or by mailing it by first-class mail to the issuing authority at the address stated in Section 3 above on the prior sheet, or at a different address if I am given notice of that different address. Number 5, obligations of persons under this note. If more than one person signs this note, each person is fully and personally obligated to keep all the promises made in this note, including the promise to provide documentation. Any person who is a guarantor, surety, or endorser of this note is also obligated to do these things. Any person who takes over these obligations, including the obligations of a guarantor, surety, or endorser of this note, is also obligated to keep all the promises made in this note. The issuing authority may enforce its rights under this note against each person individually or against all of us together. This means that any one of us may be required to provide all necessary documentation under this note. And last, 6, waivers. I and any other person who has obligations under this note waive the rights of presentment and notice of dishonor. Presentment means the right to require the issuing authority to demand documentation due. Notice of dishonor means the right to require issuing authority to give notice to other persons the documentation due has not been received. Witness the hands and seals of the undersigned, which in this case is you. I'll have you go ahead and sign here and date here. All right. Next up, we have the notice of furnishing negative information to be completed and returned. That should be your name and address. Good. April 9th, 2022. Recorder, that's me. Office 679. In accordance with the Department Transparency Fix, or DTF, Act of 2001, we are required to provide you the following statement as prescribed by Section 311. We may report information about your application to duly authorized agencies and partners. Records of cancellation, breaches, voided applications, and fraudulent documentation may be retained by these agencies in perpetuity after the closing of the case. I'll have you sign and date. Perfect. Next up, we have status perpetuity approval. Correct address and name? Good. Length, me, 679. That all looks good. I hereby acknowledge that upon application approval and notwithstanding any material breach of agreement or amendment to relation, the informed unempowered status will be granted to the unempowered in perpetuity without date of expiry. Have you sign and date. Perfect. All right. We have our character statement appraisal acknowledgement. You? Good. April 9th. Me. 679. You are entitled to receive a copy of any character statements / appraisals outside of those provided by you, developed in connection with your application at least 3 business days prior to your closing date. A copy of each statement developed in connection with your application should have been delivered to you at least 3 or more business days prior to the closing date. If you wish to proceed with your application, your signature will acknowledge either 1. Your receipt of each statement 3 or more business days prior to your case closing, or alternatively, number 2, that you have previously waived your right to receive a copy of any statement developed in connection with your application 3 or more business days prior to the closing date. I'll have you sign and date. Great. Okay. Now we're into the closing disclosure. It's another long one. So we have your projected closing information. So like we touched on in that earlier one, all of these dates are projections based off of this being submitted today on 4/9. So your projected close date would be 5/9/2022. Date issued, provided it was approved by that closing date, would be 5/10/2022. Disbursement date of 5/10/2022. Your agent, that's me, ER11199. Case number 9300210270206. Filing information. Applicant, this should be you and your address, correct? Perfect. The unempowered name, is that correct? Perfect. And it is being issued by the department. Dump. Terms information. Your status, you are currently still in a review status. Filing, it was filed as a non-married partner. It was filed, or rather I should say will be filed today, 4/9/2022. And expire date N/A, this isn't a temporary application. You're not applying for a temporary status. So there is no expiration date. All dates listed are projected pending verification and approval by issuing authority and are not a guarantee of application approval. All dates are considered void upon application denial. Any changes to the above fields must be made through written notice issued to both applicant and issuing authority. and are non-binding until delivery of written notice to both parties. Closing disclosures. Now here we have what I had talked about way early in the beginning. So on your closing disclosures, assumption. If the nature of the relation between applicant and unempowered changes materially before the date of expiry, if applicable, issuing authority, the two options are either will allow, under certain conditions outlined in Addendum A, assumed continuance of the informed unempowered status to the unempowered on the original terms, or will not allow assumed continuance of the informed unempowered status to the unempowered on the original terms, in which case a new application must be filed to the issuing authority for review. Now, as your recorder, I am authorized to state that in this case, they will allow it. Like I had said earlier, that is the standard application. Late response. If additional verification documentation is requested by the issuing authority and it is not received within the outlined 36-hour window beginning at time of request issuance, issuing authority reserves the right to cancel the application. Contingent approval. Issuing authority reserves the right to approve applications contingent upon the receipt of additional documentation in specific circumstances outlined in Addendum A. This case is either eligible for contingent approval or not eligible for contingent approval. In your case, it is not eligible. But again, that's the standard. Non-secured status. Informed unempowered status granted to unempowered individuals is non-secured and is subject to change. If we're good with all that, I'll have you sign and date. It's almost done. We're getting there. Alrighty. Now, this is another one that's mostly for me, but I need you to sign it as well. So, we are currently looking at Form URT 6911-2020, discontinue prior editions, EXI number 08725141. All of that mumbo jumbo is the authorization for the Department of Uniform Magical Practices to release empowered identification number EIN verification to Department Recorder. What this sheet is saying, basically, as a summary, is it is allowing the department to verify when I submit your documentation that documentation does match for the purposes of closing the case. But to go through it, completely. Printed name, that should be your name. Yep. Date of birth, that should be your date of birth. And that should be your empowered identification number. Great. Reason for authorizing consent. Please select one. Our options are to apply for informed unempowered status, to apply for a job, to meet a licensing requirement, or other. In this case, we are applying for informed unempowered status. With the following department recorder, that's me, ER 11199 out of office 679. I authorize the Department of Uniform Magical Practices to verify my name and EIN to the department recorder for the purpose I identified. I am the individual to whom the empowered identification number was issued, or the parent or legal guardian of a minor. I declare and affirm under the penalty of perjury that the information contained herein is true and correct. I acknowledge that if I make any representation that I know is false to obtain information from the Department of Uniform Magical Practices records, I could be found guilty of a misdemeanor and fined up to $5,000. This consent is valid for one-time use only. This consent is valid only for 90 days from the date signed, unless otherwise indicated by the individual named above. If you wish to change this time frame, fill in the following. This consent is valid for 90 days from the date signed. Because we're not wanting to change it, we do want it to be 90. I'll have you initial here when we're ready. I'm also going to have you sign and date. Relation, if not the individual to whom the EIN was issued, you are that person. You are not the parent. It's your number. So we're going to go ahead and skip that section. Before I have you sign, though, I am going to read the rest of the statements on here. Furnishing us this information is voluntary. However, failing to provide all or any part of the information may prevent us from releasing information to a designated department recorder, in this case, me. We will use the information to verify your name and empowered identification number. In addition, we may share this information in accordance with the department laws. For example, where authorized, we may use and disclose this information in computer matching programs in which our records are compared with other records to establish or verify a person's eligibility for department benefit programs and for repayment of incorrect or delinquent debts under these programs. Notice to number holder. That's you. The department recorder has entered into an agreement with the Department of Uniform Magical Practices that, among other things, includes restrictions on the further use and disclosure of the Department of Uniform Magical Practices verification of your EIN. So basically, I can't do anything with this information as it is not relevant to the case. Are we good? Okay, so I'll have you initial here, sign here, date here, and again, you can skip that section about relation. All right, and we are on, believe it or not, the last page. All right, authorization to complete blank spaces. Again, we've got your case number 9300210270206. Your name and address, is that correct? Good. Date, April 9th, 2022. That is my number. That is my office. This disclosure is provided to you pursuant to Department Revised Statute 8631, Code F1418202. Your signature below authorizes the department recorder, that's me, to fill in spaces you left blank in specified application documents you are about to sign or may have already signed. Under department law, you can give this authority, but you are not required to do so. You can refuse to sign any documents until all blanks are completely filled in. Acknowledgement. By signing below, you hereby acknowledge reading and understanding all of the information disclosed above and receiving a copy of this disclosure on the date indicated below. Okay, then I'll have you sign and date for me. Perfect. All right, let me go ahead and go through the paperwork one more time just to make sure that we have everything that we need here. We have instructions to Department Recorder, Plat and Act, good to go. Application initial approvals. Yep, we got that. Signature name affidavit. Yeah, we have that. Filing, vesting approval. Yes, we signed that. Application addendum approval. Signed. Application filing status. Non-married partner. Signature for the name date. Okay. Terms and conditions. A couple pages there. Applicants. You signed data. I signed the data. Uniform application. We got name, EIN, alternate name, state of birth, citizenship, contact information, current address, listen to mailing address. Okay. Current employment, self-employment, employer, business name, section 2 unpowered information, name, social, alternate name, state of birth, citizenship, marital status, dependents, contact information. Current address, mailing address, you are the non-married partner. Application information. Yep, we filled out the affidavit. Signed and dated. Acknowledgements. Note. Got your name and your date. Furnishing negative information. Signed and dated. Status perpetuity approval. Dated. Carrier statement. Appraisal acknowledgement. Signed and date. Closing disclosure. Will allow. Not eligible. Signed and dated. Authorization to release the EIN, apply for status, 90 days, signed date, and blank spaces, signed the date. All right, it looks like we are good to go. I have your full packet of information. I will go ahead and file all of those things, all those papers, all that supporting documentation into record. And you are projected. We are meeting our filing date of 4/9 and our sign date of 4/9. So they are projected to close your case, approval or denial, on 5/9/2022. So in 1 month, you should hear back on the status of your application. Are there any other questions that you have for me? Anything I can help clarify? Anything at all? No? All right. Well, again, it was very nice to meet you. It was a pleasure serving as your department recorder today. And I wish you the best of luck with your application. Thank you. I hope you have a great day.